Prologue. Life is about struggle. The struggle against the world around you and the person inside of you. Every day in this world is a war for your right to live in it. Collected Teachings of the Exalted Sovereign. 4.26.1371 AS of the Galactic Standard Calendar. The jungle teemed with life. Every tree and bush held within it an entire world of insects and lesser beasts in a constant war for survival. Such was the way of the natural world. Nothing was ever given, only earned. Even beetles crawling up the leaves of ferns found their grip tested as the plants snapped at them with whip-like cracks of their branches in an attempt to knock them away, like a cow flicking its tail to swat away a fly. This constant battle made the wilderness seem like a massive creature stirring and writhing in perpetual slumber, as trees swayed and plants snapped at the life deemed unworthy of its bounty. Only in one spot did the jungle seem to still itself. Zacharias stood in the midst of this sea of greens, reds, and oranges, like a predator standing tall before his prey. He wore sleek, black armor of chitinous carapace that covered him from head to toe, save for 3 lines across the crested helm that made up a tinted visor. With it, the entire jungle was laid bare to him, all major movements highlighted to him along with a variety of other useful information. Nothing of note stood out, and so he changed his tactics. Zacharias' eyes closed, while he felt deep inside of himself. A fire burned within, not physically, but at the substance around his very soul. His potential. The potential that was held within every living being and surrounded every living soul. The potential that turned ordinary men and women into heroes of legend and song. A being's potential was not born ignited. There were only 3 ways to ignite one's potential: to be pushed to the brink of life or death survival, to be ignited by a dragon, or to submit to the teachings of the Exalted Sovereign, who governed all life. Ignited had a greater connection to all life, and more importantly, could feel the presence of others who had similar gifts. He could feel 2 other lit fires nearby. His hunting partner, Zenobia, perched atop one of the great trees like a vulture searching for carrion, a rifle resting across her lap. And Theseus, with a spear in one hand and a large carapace shield in the other. Just like Zacharias, the jungle stilled around them both. These were not what he was searching for. Distantly, through the connection of his potential, he could feel another fire burning. It wouldn't be long now. His thoughts were interrupted by a brief click from the inside of his helmet, followed by a gruff voice. "It is still not too late to turn around, Zah." It was Theseus, his eyes still on the horizon as they awaited their prey. "If we do not act, then those outside of the wall will continue to suffer against it." Zacharias' calm and stoic voice came in reply. "They're the ones who decided to settle outside of the safe area. If they cannot protect themselves, then the jungle is bound to swallow them eventually. If you ask me, it is a wonder the Sun Eater even allows them to stay on this world."
"Unity is the hand that guides the sword of valor, Theseus,"
Zenobia's voice quipped within their radio, prompting a grunt from the man and a small smirk from Zacharias.
"Don't go quoting the Exalted Sovereign to me, Zen. We cannot help every cindering person if they insist on walking into a deadly jungle the second we stop holding their hand."
Theseus bit back before quickly adding,
"One ignited beast isn't worth sending 3 of us to deal with it. I might as well spend all day in bed and get the same waste of potential growth."
Only now did Theseus's visor turn toward Zacharias, who shrugged to reply, before planting his gauntlets atop the hilts of 2 swords on either side of his waist.
"Enough, Theseus. Your gripes aren't about to let our quarry suddenly stop caring that we're in its territory. It won't be long now. It seeks a challenge as much as we do."
He could feel it getting closer. There was no point in trying to hide or lay a trap for it. It could sense them just as well as they could sense it. As he felt its presence come closer, he gestured for the others to get ready. He drew both of his blades, each an excellently crafted length of steel with a graceful curve to it starting from the hilt and working its way to the point. He reached out through his connection with the life around him, his two allies like two balls of white fire sitting against a muted colored jungle behind them. Then the creature they were hunting. The white fire of its potential blazed hot and now could be seen much more clearly. Unlike the three of them, however, the white sphere in the center did have a shape, like a set of eyes peering through the dark of night, tendrils barely perceptible, reaching out towards all that surrounded it against a backdrop of fire. A true predator. The active movement of the jungle around them stilled completely.
Oh no!
Zenobia began over the radio, a slight tremble in her voice. A feeling of dread filled the air, and where once the fires of their potential had given their egos warmth against the unknown, now there was only fear. Zacharias opened his eyes again and could see the jungle around them had stilled. The preternatural senses granted to him by his potential heard the sounds of taloned feet scraping against the now silent underbrush, and low-hanging branches snapping against a wide body.
It's cindering-shaped?
Theseus called out in frustration, unable to hide the fear in his voice as he shifted back with his weapon at the ready.
That's why we're out here? Zaw, if this thing's identity wasn't messing with my head, I'd...
Its roar resounded through the air, the voice sending a tingling wave down the spines of each of the ignited who had come to face it.
Hold!
Zacharias bellowed, one sword raising into the air. He was trembling, his heart being forced to pound heavier as the creature's identity threatened to overwhelm them.
The exalted sovereign watches us now. Today we prove our potential to be greater than this beast. Hold, burn you!
Another snap of wood announced its arrival. The creature was near 12 feet tall, not counting the wicked horns on its head. Two gleaming golden eyes stared at them all beneath the shade of the trees. It stood on two legs, its form hunched forward with two long arms hung in front of it, occasionally helping push its way through the underbrush. Each hand and foot had a set of curved talons, useful for digging and tearing, while it had an elongated muzzle with rows of sharp teeth. A serpentine-like tongue slid out before brushing over its maw, while a long, sinuous tail dragged behind it as it approached the ignited. It had come to see what had stumbled into its territory, expecting to find worthy prey, and was only faced with three ignited. Spines on its back bristled as it let out a low, raking growl, its head lowering as it got down onto all fours, eyes set on Zacharias. Through his brave front, Zacharias once more reached out through their life sense to confirm that yes, it was not a trick of the light, and he had seen the soul of the creature had become shaped, earning an identity that represented fear, from what Zacharias could tell. It was slightly reassuring that the voice in his head screaming at him to run was not his own. Not completely, anyway. Zacharias and Theseus shifted closer to one another. Zenobia remained resting on a large branch in a nearby tree, rifle at the ready. They hoped that the creature would go for the more immediate prey. They were right. The ignited suits warned them as the creature briefly flashed red on their display before it roared again and shot forward at a speed that no creature of its size should be able to manage. Zacharias wanted to scream and run, but managed to steel himself long enough to shout, "Theseus!" His companion did not need to be told twice. He threw himself to the side, Zacharias going in the opposite direction as the creature tore through the air where they had once been, its sheer speed making the air whip up in a frenzy and peel away some of the bark of the nearby tree. A shot rang out and slammed into the beast's head, making it jerk to the side. It let out another roar as Zenobia shouted over their comm channel,
I think that only made it angrier.
The creature's feet dug into the earth as it broke into a sprint, tail whipping behind it as it found its new target, golden eyes meeting Zenobia's as it closed the gap between her and her tree in an instant, talons flashing in the light before it carved through the massive tree. Zenobia's balance lurched, and she nearly lost her balance before she leapt up into the air, rockets in her boots activating in her panic and helping her stumble to the next tree over. The beast was already nearly upon her, using the still falling tree as leverage to leap up into the air for her. Her eyes widened as she stared into its gaping maw. A force rammed into it from the side. Theseus had charged after the creature, his ignited potential granting him increased speed, and his armor assisting it further, as he thrust the shield up into the creature, knocking it off trajectory and making the two of them crash through another tree. He raised his spear to pierce its heart, a battle cry on his lips, but it was cut short as one taloned hand shoved him away. Talons raked over his armor and caused a web of cracks to line the surface before he was thrown through another tree that kicked up dirt in its wake. The creature recovered, hitting the ground with a skid and roll before it went back on all fours. It roared in frustration, sending another wave of tingling dread through the three of them, and stole precious seconds to react from them. Zacharias was not about to let his companions have all the glory. He crossed the toppled trees in an eye blink, charging the shaped creature. It dug its claws into the dirt beneath it before pouncing forward, meeting his charge. Zenobia began to fire upon it from above, her gun making an echoing crack through the air. Yet all it seemed to do was bounce off of its thick hide.
Its scales are too thick. I can't find a weak spot,
she cried. Both it and Zacharias clashed, the impact causing a plume of dust to blow away from them as Blade met brutal, ferocious claws in an expert series of parries and strikes.
Focus on its limbs! Give me openings!
He snapped back in the midst of his clash with the beast. Zacharias' blood pumped through his veins. Staring down the creature, he felt the fire of his potential burn brighter and brighter with each moment that he managed to survive. The joints of his armor groaned under the constant strain of impacts, but held. They were able to withstand two ignited clashing, but with a shaped, there was uncertainty there. This creature was a league above them, and every matched blow reminded him of that. Either way, he had its attention. Then the beast roared in pain. Theseus had returned, a rocket-aided jump bringing the warrior square onto its back. With the natural might of his ignited potential and the armor, he managed to pierce a wound into its scaly back. The doubts had retreated for a moment. They had managed to surround the creature, Zacharias before it, blades flashing in the light, Theseus on its back, spear rearing back for another blow, and Zenovia's rifle aiming for its legs now to keep it off balance. A perfectly coordinated hunt. There was something wrong, however. Zacharias had felt his potential burn like a new sun in his body as he faced down the creature, but he did not feel the eyes of the exalted sovereign on him. Was this not worthy prey? A keening sound rang from the creature, and all three of the ignited warriors froze in place. Zacharias tried to wrestle back control of his body, but was struggling to do so. What was happening? He tapped into his life sense to try and see. The beast's potential burned hot. Tendrils of fire and shadow seemed to lick at the edges of its very soul, while the ignited's own flame seemed to sputter in uncertainty. Every part of Zacharias' brain screamed at him to drop his weapon and run. That uncertainty was deadly, and it gave the beast just enough time to wrap its long tail around Theseus and tug him forward. It brought all of its talons together and speared the man straight through his stomach. There was an accompanying crunch as his armor gave in to the strength of the beast. Zacharias cried out, seeing the flame around Theseus' soul suddenly flash in one final blaze of glory before snuffing out entirely, the soul itself floating away weightlessly toward the heavens like a feather lost to the wind. Theseus dropped his weapons, and the creature cast aside his body with a flick of its tail, sending it crashing through one more splintered tree before it slumped to the ground. The keening continued as it then brought its golden gaze to Zacharias.
Zenobia, run,
Zacharias whispered.
Zah?
There is a fine line between ambition and foolishness, and we have chosen the latter this day. I will not have us lose 3 ignited to this creature due to my mistake in judgment.
The ignited stood with weapons at the ready. The beast did not charge him. Its tail was shifting from side to side, like a content dog, and Zacharias could swear there was a grin on its razored maw.
Then let's both retreat,
Zenobia insisted.
That is what it wants. Go, Zenobia. Tell my sons that should I not see them come the next sunrise, I will see them in memory.
Zah!
Zenobia called out, but he did not reply and brought his full attention to the beast across from him. The fires of potential blazed to new heights as he let out an exhale, and with it, a tremble working its way through his frame. The grip on his weapons tightened as he accepted that this moment meant the end of his life, or the shaping of his soul. He felt foreign eyes upon him from on high. The exalted sovereign's attention coaxed to him through the weight of this moment upon his life. The knowledge that his God now watched this duel made his heart hammer in his chest. What had changed? Life or death struggle was enough for one to ignite, but to be shaped as well? His eyes widened as it all clicked. His attempt to sacrifice himself to save his allies, his core motivation behind everything he did. The exalted sovereign saw it now, his desire to protect all those around him, and wished to see the power of that motivation here in the slaying of the shaped creature before him. The beast bellowed at Zaharias, a warning and a taunt, to either face it with honor or to run and die a coward. Zaharias roared in reply, sliding his blades together to create a rasping hiss. Then this was truly it, his chance to shape, his chance to become something within the order of the Ignited, and show his children the galaxy he had been protecting them from all this time. He glanced back to where Zenobia was in one final, silent plea for her to leave. She returned the look before leaping out of sight. He let out a breath he didn't remember holding before focusing on the beast. He pressed his weight onto one foot, then launched himself forward, the force cracking the earth beneath him as he charged the beast. Fear screamed in the back of his head. He was terrified, but often that is when mortals truly felt the most alive. The two clashed again, his blades being caught by crossed talons in the air, momentum holding them both there for a brief moment before the creature shoved him up and back. Ports in Zaharias' armor opened up as jets of flame shot out to right himself again, as he landed back against the ground, already dragging his foot forward to lunge again. The beast swiped for him again, but this time its talons slipped just over his head as he dropped into a slide beneath its legs. His blade cut at its haunches and made it roar in pain. As he passed its legs, he threw himself upright, now behind the creature, and twisted to face it. Its tail was already swinging towards him, but he managed to raise his blade just fast enough to catch it. The tail cracked against it like a whip, a small vacuum of air forming and snapping the blade in two at the impact. Zaharias grit his teeth, dropping the blade instantly as the creature had swung around in a wide sweep of its talons, tearing through the earth as it tried to rip Zaharias apart. The Ignited managed to leap back at the perfect time, the talons scraping over his chest plate as he skidded backwards, right next to where Theseus's shield had fallen. He grabbed it, raising it in his left hand while he held his blade in the right.
"Exalted Sovereign, watch over me as I overcome this trial,"
he shouted, meeting the beast in another charge. The two clashed and whirled around one another, blades, shield, talons, and tail, all clashing against each other in small showers of sparks. Trees splintered and shattered, wildlife scattered as their duel destroyed the jungle around them. In a matter of minutes, the once thriving patch of jungle looked as if a tornado had uprooted all of what was there and tore it to pieces. Zaharias' armor was barely holding itself together. Cracks spread across the entirety of its surface, and part of the visor had fallen off, revealing one emerald green eye and a patch of blood-stained tan skin beneath. His breathing was coming out in ragged heaves of his chest, adrenaline and his suit's systems being all that were keeping him upright. The creature, meanwhile, had half of one horn missing, a variety of cuts and bruises across its scales, and a few chunks missing entirely. All in all, this prey had proven itself to be worthy, more worthy than perhaps even Zaharias had expected. Maybe it was a mistake to send Zenobia away.
No, he thought. I couldn't risk her dying too.
He wasn't dead yet, which meant there was still a chance, however slim, for him to succeed. His emerald gaze met the beast's golden one. Amidst the adrenaline and blood in the air, there was a mutual respect shared between the two apex predators of the jungle. However, such respect would not save them. Life is a struggle, were the words of the exalted sovereign. Every day in this world is a war for your right to live in it. The two let out one final roar of challenge to one another before Zaharias ran at the beast. The beast ducked low, sweeping its talons across where the Ignited was about to cross. He leapt over it, but it was in that moment he realized his mistake. His final mistake. The creature's head lurched upwards, Zaharias' trajectory leading him right into the path of the creature's remaining horn. The systems in his armor tried to release jets to course correct, but it was too late. Crunch. Zacharias had been skewered fully on the beast's horn as it tore through armor and broke through bone, lifting him and its upper body into the air as it roared in triumph. The ignited coughed out blood, his vision going blurry and pain flaring up across his body. With one final act of defiance, he struck the beast's eye with his sword, stabbing it and causing that roar of triumph to turn into one of pain. It grabbed his arm with a taloned hand and ripped it free. He let out another cry of pain, blood spilling over the beast's maw and mixing with its own as it grabbed him with its free hand and threw him to the ground with a wet smack. Zacharias looked up to the beast above him, choking on his own blood. He wanted to still cry out in defiance, but all he could muster was a wet gurgle. The beast looked down at him, and the last thing he saw were rows of razor-sharp teeth in an expansive maw before all went black. The jungle became still once more.